go from the Premier League to the Champions League. Let's focus on that huge match between Manchester City and Real Madrid tonight. Sam, Ancelotti said he thinks whoever comes through this could go a long way. What do Opta say?
Well, these two, the last two winners of the Champions League. But our dear friend, the Opta supercomputer, we know we love to, call on him every now and again. Yeah, they say that actually Real Madrid, 6th favourites to win the Champions League this season. Man City down in 10th favourites to win the Champions League. Now, of course, the league phase has an impact on these numbers. And of course, the fact they play each other also impacts their percentages. So, but then at the same time, Barcelona finished 2nd in the league phase and they're down to 4th in terms of Opta supercomputer. So, look, whether Man City and Real Madrid will go on to go far in this tournament, the winner of, well, I think Liverpool, Arsenal, Inter Milan, Barcelona, PSG will have something to say about that for sure. And
Arsenal fans, they'll be salivating at that percentage. If we could find an Arsenal fan anywhere, I'm sure they would be. Right, these two sides have plenty of history between them, don't they? But both have struggled at points this season. Are we set for another Clásico? I think there could well be goals here. I think that's fair to say.
Could well be goals, absolutely. I mean, as you rightly said, Rob, earlier, 4th time in a row, 2 semi-finals, 1 quarter-final, and now this this Champions League playoff. And I think there's an interesting dynamic here because obviously Man City and Real Madrid were two of the teams who set up that Super League. And then the result of that Super League was the reformed Champions League. And now they face each other earlier than expected. As you can see, the record, they can be barely separated. 4 wins for Man City, 3 wins for Real Madrid. And as you rightly said, lots and lots of goals for both sides in these 12 games. And given how these two are playing this season, I think, especially defensively, I think it's going to be a repeat tonight.
Yeah, so it'll be 0-0 then. Well, it does see two of the most successful managers in the competition go head-to-head. What sets these two apart from the rest?
It's Pep Guardiola, the best tactician in the world, against Carlo Ancelotti, Mr. Champions League, more Champions League than any other manager in the modern era. And it's quite interesting. There's interesting stats between these two as to, Carlo Ancelotti has won more Champions League games in the 21st century than any other manager. Pep Guardiola in 2nd place. And, if Pep Guardiola wins tonight, he could then go on and overtake Carlo Ancelotti if he goes on to win the tournament. So that's an interesting needle. But look at the names they're ahead of as well. Sir Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, Jose Mourinho. These two in this era are really, they cannot be separated.
It's amazing the gap from Jose to even to Pep there. City face a really tricky run of fixtures, not much time to prepare for each. So how do you see them coping with this period?
Well, yeah, Real Madrid tonight. They've got to go to the Bernabeu next week in midweek. But in between that, that's a game at home to Newcastle. That is not an easy game at all. Then they host Liverpool, again, the Premier League champions, the Champions League leaders in terms of the league phase. Then they go to Spurs, who they've already lost to in the Carabao Cup in this fixture. They have Plymouth in the FA Cup, and then they go to Nottingham Forest as well. And these games are going to be really, really interesting in terms of City's performance in the Champions League next season, because obviously they could win the Champions League. That guarantees them an automatic spot. But these games will have a big say, especially this Nottingham Forest game at the bottom, as to whether they finish in the top 4 or 5 in the league. Newcastle as well will have something to say about whether City finish in the top 4 or 5, because obviously it could be 5 teams as well.
Yeah, well, and that depends on if City go through here, doesn't it? So exactly. It's all about that. What is it called?
Knock-on effects.
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah. But if we're looking for some good omens, they could be handed a boost. Ruben Diaz coming back from injury. He played those 45, didn't he, against Orient. Their record is much better with him, isn't it?
Absolutely, much, much better. You can see the win percentage is higher with Diaz in the Premier League than compared to without, and there's more goals conceded without Diaz compared to when Diaz is there. Shots conceded as well. Again, it's only by about 1 or 2 shots, but these are the margins in these big games against Real Madrid that are really, really important. And then in terms of Premier League points per game, City don't win as much, will pick up enough draws. When Ruben Diaz is missing. John Stones as well, making his way back to fitness. And a lot has been said about Man City's defence this season. But if Ruben Diaz can get back and John Stones can get back into the form we've seen him before, then maybe it can ease City's burden in that long run of games we've just seen.
Madrid made it a record-extending 15th European crown at Wembley. What is it about this competition that brings out the best of them?
I don't know whether it's the Santiago Bernabeu lights or whether it's just the fact they've got Carlo Ancelotti, but they really do have a really big impact in the Champions League, particularly in the knockout phases, and particularly to English teams as well. 13 times that Real Madrid have knocked out English clubs in the knockout phase, more than any other side in Champions League history. They're a force to be reckoned with. They've added Kylian Mbappe this season. They're an even bigger force. They've got the great front four. It's like a Galacticos-style team that we saw in the early 2000s as well, with Jude Bellingham in there, Vinicius Junior, some of the best players in the world in their position. It's a really fantastic matchup we've got here.
They consider it to be their trophy, don't they? Carlo Ancelotti's side then heading to Manchester, though, in the midst of a defensive crisis. No Antonio Rudiger, Eder Militao, Tchouaméni expected to start at centre-back. He gave away that interesting penalty at the weekend, didn't he? They've also struggled in big games this season, though, haven't they?
Yeah, it's a really worrying one of form for Real Madrid, because we talk about them being big in the Champions League, but this season they haven't really shown up in many of the big games. So you can see they've lost 4 in a row here. They've lost both games against Barcelona. They've drawn twice against Atletico Madrid. They've lost against Liverpool. They've lost against AC Milan. They have won some of those big games. We've put Atalanta in there because that is the Super Cup, and they did play them in the Champions League phase as well and did pick up a big win. But they were hugely fortunate in that game. They also beat Borussia Dortmund, which was a repeat of last season's Champions League final. But not many big results have gone Real Madrid's way this season. And I don't think you get much bigger than Manchester City and Pep Guardiola away from home.
Yeah, with everything that goes with it, the Barcelona history as well, isn't it? But here we go. Los Cuatro Fabulosos, the Fab Four. Fantastic Four, whatever way you want to describe it. Will that send fear into the hearts of Manchester City fans? And they're beginning to gel now, aren't they?
They are beginning to gel, and look, it is a fearsome front four. Rodrygo, Bellingham, Vinicius and Kylian Mbappe. But it's also a slight bit of a problem for them in terms of Real Madrid in these big games, which is why maybe they've struggled in those big games we've seen earlier. And it's all to do with how they set up on the pitch. So they play with this sort of front four up front, as you see. So this is Kylian Mbappe's pass map for Real Madrid this season. As you can see, he plays with Rodrygo, Vinicius and Jude Bellingham quite a lot, with Ferland Mendy or Fran Garcia also playing in a high position. But look, speaking of these fullbacks, left back high, right back high, it leaves them very, very open in these positions. Just 2 defensive midfielders and 2 centre-backs. If I was Manchester City, I'd be looking at this area of the pitch in terms of the transitions to try and hurt Real Madrid. And it was interesting what happened on Saturday against Atletico Madrid. Real Madrid in the first half went gung-ho. They went 1-0 down to that Julian Alvarez penalty. The second half, instead of going gung-ho again looking for the equaliser, they sat back a little bit more. And then they got the equaliser, and then they got the result. So actually, maybe being a bit more defensively secure will suit Carlo Ancelotti and Real Madrid tonight. But do they have the players? Do they have that front four to do that? That's very interesting. It's also interesting that Ancelotti played a slightly defensive Real Madrid team in that Champions League quarter-final last season, which they won against Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. So how they approach it is going to be really interesting. But it's going to be a great game. We're probably going to get goals. We're probably going to get transitions everywhere on the pitch. 2 teams trying to hurt them on the counter-attack and 2 great front lines as well.